Moses Montefiore friends, it is almost Shabbat. I'm sorry that I'm recording so close to Shabbat. And this week we have a double portion, and it starts out with the story of Shemitah, with the year that we have to leave our lands fallow, etc., especially in Israel, where they don't work the land, and the Shemitah, or the Shvit, as it's called. And it says, Daber al b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem. Speak to the Jewish people and say to them. And what's the difference between Daber and v'amarta, and to say to them? Why does it use both languages? And we know Daber usually means something a little tougher, and v'amarta means something that's said in a nicer way, a kind of softer approach. So hold that in your pocket for a second. I want to tell you a little story. There's a comedian who is an Israeli comedian who sends out a little newsletter and has a podcast, and I listened to it, and he sent out a thing that said that recently he was rejected from something that he applied for. He thought he had a gig to do his comedy, and he was rejected, and he was feeling a little down, and he was talking to his wife and said, yeah, that's part of life. And he started thinking about it, and he said the Hebrew word for rejection is dexuya, which is spelled Dalid, Ches, Vav, Yud, Yud, Hey. So he said, oh, look at that. And he wrote in his email that he sent out to his subscribers, Dexuya, you circle the middle, it has the word chai, which means life. And you could think that when you get rejected, that's a sour part of life, but you know what? That's part of life. That's part what makes life what it is, and we have to appreciate the bad things and the good things. The rejection isn't quite so bad. So I wrote back to him, and he hasn't responded yet. I don't know if he will. I'm just one of his subscribers. He probably calls me what we call a nunnik in Hebrew, in Yiddish, nunnik, that writes back when someone says, here's my idea, and says, well, here's my idea. So I said, I love what you said, but I'm going to tell my students and the families in my weekly recording that look at the word dexuya. When it means to reject, it means dexuya is chai Hashem, that it is the life that God gives us. So let's go back to what I told you to put in your pocket about, about the Shemitah and the leaving your land every 7 years. There's two ways to look at it. One is Daber el b'nei Yisrael. The God, the king, says, do this, whether you like it or not. Every 7 years you have to do that. V'amarta alehem has a different perspective. It's something that you get to do. What is that about? Let's say the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the Or HaChaim wrote in his Perush on Chumash that, let's say somebody says to you, you know what, I'm going to give you a house for free. But once a year, for 1 week, I live there, and you have to leave for once a week. And you'd say, well, free house. I'm willing to do that. I'll stay in a hotel. I'll stay with some friends once a year. That sounds like a good deal. So if you look at Shemitah from that perspective, that God gives us the land, then it is Chai Hashem, Dexuya. We rejected, we're pushed out from the land every once in a while. It's okay, because I knew that coming in. That was the deal. I learned that in elementary school. I learned that in high school. I knew by the time I bought this land that every 7 years I don't get to work it. So it's okay. V'amarta alehem. I say to them, that's the deal coming in. And that really is something that we could look at. All things that seem to be difficult in mitzvot, we can always say, look, God said these are the rules coming in. And if we look at it that way, and it is when we push off something and we have something we're not allowed to do, like Shabbat, we say, okay, but I knew coming in that I get Shabbat once a week. So it's like the house that I get for free, and once a week I don't get to do certain things. That's okay. That was part of the deal. And maybe I'll like it. Maybe I'll enjoy going on vacation once a year when the owner comes back to the house, and maybe Shabbat and letting the field rest is a good thing. So dexuya, let's remember that, is Chai Hashem, the life of God. Shabbat Shalom.